sick and tired of the high costs and inefficiency plaguing our U.S. healthcare system? Do you feel like you're navigating a maze when dealing with insurance companies, only to end up paying a fortune for basic medical services? Then this Broken Healthcare podcast is for you. So get ready to take control of your healthcare. Here's your host, Ray Kober.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Famous Peter Drucker quote I hear repeated over and over and over again. And I don't disagree with it, except for one thing. Without strategy, you can't have a culture. Am I wrong? Let's think about that for a second. If you have no strategy, you have no business. If you have no business, you have no people. If you have no people, you have no culture. Come on, people. So yes, I get what he's saying there, right? Your culture should drive your strategy. Your culture should inform your strategy. I get it. But the reality is, as business leaders, we have to pay attention to our costs. Costs are significant. If you're not managing your SG&A budget, there's a great Harvard publication out there, and it talks about your SG&A being like cholesterol in a business. And you have good cholesterol and you have bad cholesterol. And if you're not managing your expenses will eat you alive. You will have bad cholesterol. It will drive down the health of your organization, and you will fail miserably. And so with healthcare being a top line expense, typically 1, 2, or 3 after payroll most often, doesn't it make sense to pay attention to this and at least have a handle on the numbers? That's the subject of today's talk. I want you to think about what you're doing today to manage the expense. And if the answer is you're focused on your business and you rely on your insurance broker to manage the expense for you, it's acceptable as long as you are in the know. What do I mean by that? There are a ton of brokers out there. First of all, I think you need to know the math, right? So let's really begin with the math. And the math is, if you're in a fully insured plan or you're in a self-funded plan, you have to calculate your costs, your cost per employee per year. We call it PEPY in our circles. And it gives you a barometer or a benchmark to measure against the national averages, which are published by Kaiser Family Foundation year over year. So at least you have a measuring stick. You can say, all right, how are we doing against the national average? And then maybe if you're in a big market like New York or San Francisco or LA, et cetera, maybe you need to adjust up a little bit because the cost of living is higher. And if you're in a rural area, maybe you ratchet it down a little bit. But at least it gives you an indication for where you should be, some sense of it. Now, if you look at the insurance carriers, if they are managing your claims, I'm telling you right off the bat, that's a recipe for disaster. It's like the fox watching the hen house. Now, why do I say this? Well, don't take my word for it. Go back and look at insurance carriers over the course of the last 20 years. They're all publicly traded. And take a look at their stock prices. And what you're going to find is that they've done a phenomenally good job for their shareholders. So their fiduciary responsibility is to their shareholders, and they take care of that responsibility exceedingly well. Yet your costs are increasing by double digits every year. So how does that reconcile? They're crushing it for their shareholders. They're coming back to you every year saying, your business is costing us money, therefore we have to jack your rates. That's the world that we're living in. If you're in a self-funded plan, you might say to yourself, oh, Ray, we're ahead of this. We're self-funded. And then the next question is, okay, well, how does your self-funded plan work? How are you managing claims? Who's adjudicating claims? And so that may lead us to have you say, well, it's United Healthcare, or it's Cigna, or it's Aetna, in which case you really are not in the best spot, because if they're managing claims, they're adjudicating claims, and they're not necessarily looking for opportunities for savings. And you might say, well, that's crazy. Why would they want to pay more money? And I touch on this in another episode, but there's something called the MLR, the medical loss ratio, which states that the more money an insurance company bills, the more money an insurance company gets to keep for administrative overhead and profit. It's the way our system is built. And you might say, okay, well, that doesn't apply to self-funded. Well, guess again, it's all running on the same chassis. And so the reality is, unless you are on top of your claims, and one of the most brilliant guys that I've heard speak in health insurance circles, his name is Kevin O'Kane. He learned insurance back in the 1960s, and he's a titan in our business as far as I'm concerned. And the best advice that I ever got, spending a ton of time sitting in conference rooms, learning about insurance, which, trust me, I'd rather be doing other things with my life. But I'll impart his words of wisdom, which is very simple. You must manage claims prospectively. What does that mean? It means ahead of time. It means you have to know the cost of what you're paying for before the services are rendered. Doesn't that just make sense, folks? So if you're in a self-funded plan, in an ASO arrangement, administrative services only, meaning that the insurance carrier is also adjudicating your claims and they are handling everything for you, you're not in a good spot, and you could do better. Okay, so that really should be your takeaway there. And then on the broker side, getting back to your broker who you're relying on to manage this expense for you. Well, what is the mandate of the brokerage? How are their financials? Are they a large publicly traded brokerage? And if so, do you really think that your agent, who you're so fond of at the local level, who probably does a great job for you, who you go out to games with in the theater and they take you out to dinner, and it's become more than a business relationship, it's a close personal relationship. That agent, are they calling the shots? Are they formulating the strategy? Or are they simply the face of the brokerage for you, and they're doing as directed? And if I had to venture a guess, I'm going to tell you that I don't care if you're a small mom and pop or you're a Fortune 500 company, you're probably dealing with a foot soldier, probably an excellent salesperson, someone that's very smart, very charismatic, very good at what they do. And I have these people as friends too. So I'm not bashing them. I'm just telling you that their strategy doesn't align with your strategy if your strategy is to arrive at the best quality healthcare possible at the lowest cost. In order to do that, you must manage claims prospectively, and you must have transparency. You must know the cost of things. And so I wanted to dive into this today because the reality is so many folks are under the impression that their broker is managing this. And because their broker, to use like a technology equation, is IBM, no one gets fired for hiring IBM, right? Well, you might want to inspect what you expect, because the reality is what you pay for healthcare and your increases are directly correlated to how well you manage claims and to price transparency. And so in order to wrap your arms around this, you really have to deconstruct the plan that you're in, break it into the sum of its parts, and then focus on each of those buckets, just like a supply chain, which is exactly what it is. And in doing so, you'll be well on your way to managing this expense. That's what I got for you today. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Join us on the next one. See you then.
So that's it for today's episode of Broken Healthcare. Head on over to iTunes or wherever you listen and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week who posts a review on iTunes will win a chance in the grand prize drawing to win a $15,000 value private VIP day with Ray Kober himself. Be sure to head on over to brokenhealthcarepodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Ray's gift and join us on the next episode.